Welcome to Motivational Humanity. You are not alone.
You already know something is wrong. You've known for a while, actually. Maybe longer than you'd like to admit. There's this quiet, persistent ache that lives somewhere between your chest and your throat, and you've gotten so used to it that you've almost started calling it normal. You walk on eggshells in your own home. You rehearse conversations before you have them. You replay the ones that already happened, desperately searching for where you went wrong. And here's the thing that nobody talks about. The thing that keeps women like you up at 3 a.m, staring at the ceiling with the weight of 1,000 unspoken truths pressing down on you. You still love them. Or you love who they used to be. Or who they promised they'd be. Or who you believed with your whole heart they could become. If you were just patient enough, loving enough, quiet enough, good enough. That's the part that breaks me. Because you are good enough. You always were. Let me ask you something, and I want you to really sit with this before you answer. When was the last time you had a conversation? Just a regular, ordinary conversation, where you didn't feel like you were walking a tightrope, where you weren't measuring your words, editing your feelings, monitoring their expression for the first sign of a storm rolling in. If you have to think hard to remember, that tells you everything. There's a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from living alongside a narcissist. It doesn't look like regular tired. It doesn't get fixed by a good night's sleep or a weekend away. It lives deep in your bones, in the way you second-guess your own memory, in the way you've started to wonder, quietly, shamefully, if maybe you're the problem after all. That's called gaslighting, and it is one of the most insidious forms of emotional violence a person can experience. Because it doesn't leave marks anyone else can see. It leaves marks on the inside, on the soft, sacred places where your sense of self used to live. Here's what I want you to understand right now, before we go any further together. You are not crazy. You are not too sensitive. You are not imagining things. What you are is a woman who loved deeply in the wrong direction for longer than was safe for your soul. And there is no shame in that. None. The capacity to love that fully, that faithfully, is not a flaw. It's actually one of the most beautiful things about you. It just got pointed at someone who didn't know how to honor it. Narcissism, real narcissism, the kind with teeth, isn't just selfishness or arrogance. It's a relentless gravitational pull. It bends reality around itself. It takes your empathy, your nurturing, your instinct to understand and forgive, and it uses those gifts against you slowly, systematically. Often so gradually that you don't notice until you look in the mirror one day and struggle to recognize the woman looking back. I've sat with women, brilliant, warm, fiercely capable women, who described that moment to me, that mirror moment. Some of them whispered it like a confession. I don't know who I am anymore. If that sentence just landed somewhere tender in your chest, you're in the right place. Because this isn't about villainizing anyone. It's not about building a case or stoking your anger or convincing you of something you're still not sure about. You don't need me to do that. What I want to do, what I hope to do, if you'll let me stay with you a little while, is help you find your way back to yourself. That woman is still there. She didn't leave. She's been waiting underneath all the accommodating and the apologizing and the shrinking. She's patient. She's tired, but she is there. And she deserves a sanctuary. Not someday, not once everything is figured out. Now, the first step, and I know how enormous this step can feel, is simply telling yourself the truth. Not the story you've been given. Not the version where it's all your fault, or where you're overreacting, or where if you just tried harder everything would finally click into place. The truth. The quiet, stubborn, undeniable truth that has been whispering to you, probably for years. Something here is hurting me. That's where we start. Right there with that whisper. Nobody falls in love with a narcissist on purpose. I want to say that again because somewhere along the way, you may have started blaming yourself for the choice you made, for not seeing it sooner, for staying as long as you did, for going back maybe more than once after you'd already decided you were done. Stop. Just stop carrying that. The truth is, narcissists are often extraordinary in the beginning. Not ordinary good. Extraordinary. They have this rare ability to make you feel like the most seen, most understood, most cherished person in any room. There's a term for it. love bombing. But that clinical phrase doesn't quite capture the feeling of it, does it? It felt like coming home. Like finally. Like this is what everyone was talking about when they said love should feel like this. You weren't naive. You weren't weak. You were a woman receiving what looked and felt like genuine devotion, and you responded the way any open-hearted person would. You let yourself love back. Here's where it gets complicated. And I mean really complicated in the way that only the women who've lived it truly understand. Narcissistic relationships don't stay terrible. That's the cruel design of them. If they were consistently awful from the start, you'd leave. Anyone would. What keeps you in? What keeps the most intelligent, self-aware, emotionally mature women I've ever known locked in these cycles is the intermittency of it, the good days. God, the good days. There are moments of warmth and tenderness that feel so real, so close to what you originally fell in love with, that they rewrite the recent past in your memory. You find yourself thinking, see, this is who they really are. The cruelty starts to feel like the exception. The kindness feels like proof that you were right to stay, right to hope, right to believe. Psychologists call this an intermittent reinforcement pattern. What that means in plain language is this: your nervous system has been trained, not by your choice, not by your weakness, but by sheer neurological conditioning, to crave the good moments precisely because they're unpredictable. The same mechanism that makes gambling addictive. The same wiring that keeps someone pulling a slot machine lever long after logic says to walk away. You weren't trapped by stupidity. You were trapped by your own beautiful, deeply human brain doing exactly what brains do. And then there's something else. Something quieter and maybe more painful to look at directly. Most women who end up in long-term relationships with narcissists didn't stumble in randomly. For many, not all, but many, there's a history. Maybe it was a parent whose approval felt perpetually just out of reach. A childhood where love came with conditions attached. An early lesson, absorbed into the bone before you had words for it, that love is something you earn through performance, through perfection, through making yourself smaller and more accommodating so that someone else could feel bigger. That's not a flaw in your character. It's a wound. There's a difference, an enormous, important difference, and I need you to hear that clearly. Wounds can heal. Wounds do heal. But they have to be named before they can be tended to. And for so long, you may have been too busy managing someone else's emotions to turn that same gentle attention toward your own. You became fluent in their moods, their needs, their triggers, their silences and what they meant. You developed a kind of emotional radar that could detect a shift in the atmosphere before most people would even notice a cloud. That hypervigilance, that constant, exhausting scanning of the environment for danger, is not a personality quirk. It's a survival response. Your mind and body doing everything they could to keep you safe in an unsafe dynamic. The tragedy is that all that energy, all that profound attunement, all that emotional intelligence you poured into reading them was energy that couldn't go toward reading yourself. So let's do that now. Let's turn that radar inward gently, with the same compassion you'd offer a dear friend sitting across from you at your kitchen table. Ask yourself this, and don't rush past it. What did I have to give up to survive this relationship? Not the big things first. Start with the small ones. Did you stop mentioning certain friends because it always led to a fight? Did you quietly abandon a hobby or a dream because it brought too much attention or too much criticism or too little support? Did you learn to laugh a little less loudly? Cry a little more privately? Did you get so good at disappearing in small ways that you started to feel genuinely invisible? Even to yourself. Those small surrenders. That's the real ledger of what this cost you. And I'm not telling you to add it all up so you can be angry, though anger, when it comes, is healthy and right and yours to feel. I'm asking you to look at it because you cannot reclaim what you haven't acknowledged losing. Recovery from a narcissistic relationship isn't just about leaving. It's about a long, tender excavation, digging through the layers of who you became in order to survive, to find who you were before. And underneath that, maybe for the first time, to discover who you actually want to be now. Here's what I know about women who've walked this road. They come out the other side with a depth of self-knowledge that people who've never been through it can't quite access. There is a clarity, hard-won, absolutely, And I won't romanticize the cost of it, but a clarity about what truly matters, about which relationships nourish and which ones deplete, about the non-negotiable right to take up space, to have needs, to be loved without conditions, without scorecards, without the constant low-grade terror of saying the wrong thing. That clarity is waiting for you. It's not a fantasy. It's not something reserved for other women, younger women, luckier women. It's the natural destination of the work you're already beginning simply by being here, asking these questions, refusing to keep calling the ache in your chest normal. You got here through love, through hope, through the very best of who you are. Turn towards someone who didn't deserve the full, extraordinary gift of it. That's not a character flaw. That's a story. And stories, unlike the past itself, can have new endings. Let's talk about the part that the books skip over, not the decision to leave. Everyone talks about that. The courage it takes, the moment of clarity, the line that finally gets crossed. Those conversations exist. There's language for that part. What there isn't nearly enough language for is what happens after you've decided. The strange, disorienting, sometimes terrifying landscape of actually doing it. Of living inside the leaving day by day, when it doesn't feel like freedom yet, when it mostly just feels like loss. Because here's the unspoken truth that so many women carry alone, convinced it means something is wrong with them. Leaving a narcissist often feels worse before it feels better. Not slightly worse. Sometimes devastatingly, confusingly. How is this the right choice worse? And if nobody warned you about that, if you left and then felt grief instead of relief, longing instead of liberation, and thought to yourself, maybe I made a mistake, I want you to know that response isn't weakness. It isn't love overriding logic. It is your nervous system going through a real physiological withdrawal from a relationship pattern it had become deeply conditioned to. That's not metaphor. That's neuroscience. The intermittent highs of a narcissistic relationship activate the same reward circuitry in your brain as certain substances. Leaving creates a genuine withdrawal. The emptiness, the obsessive replaying of memories, the almost magnetic pullback toward them even when your rational mind knows better. That's not you being foolish. That's your brain screaming for the neurochemical pattern it learned to depend on. Being gentle with yourself during this time isn't indulgence. It's medicine. Now, the narcissist won't make the leaving easy. I think you probably already know this. There's a phenomenon that women in these situations describe with such consistent detail that it has its own name, the Hoover. Named with grim accuracy after the vacuum brand. Just when you've created some distance, just when the air starts to feel a little cleaner, they come back. And they don't come back small. They come back with the version of themselves you fell in love with. The tenderness, the attention, the I've changed and I finally see what I was doing and I've never loved anyone the way I love you. They come back with tears sometimes. With grand gestures sometimes. With rage and threats and manipulation other times. Whatever tool has worked on you before, that's the one they reach for. And this is the moment right here that I want you to grip like a lifeline. The return is not evidence of love. It is evidence of losing control. A narcissist does not come back because they miss you, the full, complicated, beautiful, autonomous human being that you are. They come back because they miss what you provided. The stability, the admiration, the emotional labor, the person who managed their world so they didn't have to. When they say I need you, what they mean, even if they don't consciously know it, is I need my supply. The distinction matters enormously, because you are a person, not a resource, and you deserve to be loved like a person. So how do you actually do this? How do you hold the line when every tender instinct you have is pulling you back toward someone who, let's be honest, still knows exactly which strings to pull? The single most important thing, the thing I've seen make the difference more than anything else, is what's called no contact. Or, if complete no contact isn't possible because of shared children or finances or legal entanglements, minimal contact with maximum boundaries. No contact is not cruelty. I know it can feel that way, especially if you're a woman whose entire orientation is toward care and connection. It can feel cold, clinical, even petty. But no contact is not about punishing them. It's about protecting you. Every time you respond to a message, you reopen the wound. Every conversation, even a calm one, even one where you hold your ground beautifully, requires you to re-enter their gravitational field. And that field is powerful. It has years of practice bending your reality. You cannot heal inside the thing that hurt you. Think of it this way. If you broke your arm, no doctor would tell you to keep using it normally while it mends. Rest isn't weakness. It's the condition that healing requires. Distance from a narcissist is the cast. It's not forever. It's just long enough for the bone to knit back together. There's another thing nobody prepares you for, and I think it might be the loneliest part of all of this. The outside world often won't understand. Narcissists, skilled, socially adept ones, are frequently beloved by everyone around them. Charming at dinner parties, generous with acquaintances, the kind of person who makes a wonderful first impression and a devastating long-term partner. So when you try to explain why you left, you may find yourself met with confusion, with minimizing, but he's always seemed so lovely, and are you sure you're not being too hard on him, and maybe if you just communicated better. That particular loneliness of knowing something deeply and not being able to make the people you love understand it is its own quiet grief. Don't underestimate it. Don't dismiss it. And please, please don't let it convince you to go back. The people who love you but don't understand, they're not seeing what you lived through behind closed doors. They saw the performance. You lived the reality. You don't need them to validate your experience for your experience to be real. Your body kept the score long before your mind found the words. Find your one person. Maybe two. The friend who listens without flinching, without fixing, without quietly taking his side. The therapist who specializes in narcissistic abuse recovery. And I say specializes with intention, because not every well-meaning counselor is equipped for the particular architecture of this kind of wound. The group online or in person of women who have sat exactly where you're sitting right now and made it to the other side. You don't need an army. You need a witness. Someone who can look at your story without looking away and reflect back to you the simple, world-shifting truth: what happened to you was real. It was not your fault. And you deserve better. Here's what the leaving actually looks like on the ground on the ordinary days. It looks like deleting the text thread and then restoring it from backup and then deleting it again. It looks like driving past a restaurant you used to love together and feeling a grief so sharp it surprises you. It looks like a Tuesday morning when you wake up and the bed feels too big and the quiet feels like punishment rather than peace. And then, slowly, not linearly, not on any schedule that grief respects, it starts to look like something else. It looks like a Saturday afternoon where 2 whole hours pass and you didn't think about them once, and you notice that only afterward. It looks like laughing at something, really laughing from the belly without calculating how they'd react to your joy. It looks like making a small decision: where to eat, what to watch, how to spend your Sunday, without the low hum of anxiety about whether it's the right answer. It looks like you slowly coming back to the surface. That Tuesday morning when the quiet feels like punishment. One day, and I promise you this, it's going to feel like something else entirely. It's going to feel like yours. There's a moment that women who've survived this kind of relationship describe, and it doesn't always look the way you'd expect it to. It's not usually dramatic. It rarely arrives as a thunderclap or a sudden cinematic rush of empowerment. More often it comes quietly, on an unremarkable afternoon. You're doing something ordinary, making tea, folding laundry, sitting in a patch of sunlight by a window, and you realize, with a gentleness that almost makes you want to weep, that you feel okay. Not ecstatic, not healed and whole and finished, just okay. Present, breathing, belonging to yourself in this moment in a way that you haven't in a very long time. That's not a small thing. Don't let anyone, don't let even the voice in your own head tell you that's a small thing. That's the first real breath. Let's talk about who you are now. Because you're not the same woman who walked into that relationship. And you're not the hollow, uncertain version of yourself that slowly emerged from it. You are something the narcissist never counted on and could never quite extinguish. You are a woman who survived. And survival, real survival, the kind that requires years of navigating psychological complexity while holding a life together, while showing up for children or work or aging parents or all of the above, while maintaining some fragile inner thread of "I know this isn't right even if I can't leave yet." That is not nothing. That is, in fact, a kind of quiet heroism that doesn't get nearly enough recognition. You didn't just endure. You adapted. You developed emotional intelligence of the highest order. You learned to read rooms, to de-escalate, to find calm in chaos, to locate the humanity in someone who was often refusing to show it. Those are not skills that disappear when the relationship ends. They belong to you. They always did. The work now, and it is work, I won't pretend otherwise, is redirecting them. Turning that extraordinary attunement back toward yourself, and eventually, when you're ready, toward relationships that are genuinely safe enough to deserve it. So what does rebuilding actually look like? Not in the motivational poster sense. In the real Tuesday morning, sometimes I still cry in the car sense. It starts, I think, with the body. Because one of the most under-acknowledged consequences of long-term narcissistic abuse is what it does to your physical self. The chronic stress, the hypervigilance, the years of cortisol flooding your system, that lives in the body long after the relationship ends. Women describe it in so many ways. The jaw they didn't know they were clenching. The shoulders that never fully drop. The stomach that still tightens when their phone rings, even after the number is blocked. The startling, almost embarrassing way they flinch at a raised voice that isn't even directed at them. Your nervous system learned to live in a state of low-grade emergency. And it doesn't automatically stand down just because the threat is gone. This is why I'm a believer, deeply, from everything I've seen, in the power of gentle, consistent physical practices during recovery. Not punishment. Not the aggressive, white-knuckled kind of self-improvement that our culture loves to sell to women in pain. I mean the quiet kind. Walking and actually noticing what you see. Yoga if it calls to you. Sitting outside in the morning with your coffee before anyone needs anything from you. Placing your hand on your own chest sometimes and simply breathing. Learning, one small moment at a time, that your body is a place you can come back to rather than flee from. The nervous system heals at its own pace. But it does heal. Now I want to talk about something that tends to arrive somewhere in the middle of recovery, often unexpectedly, and can feel deeply uncomfortable if you're not prepared for it. Anger, real anger. Not the guilty, suppressed, immediately apologized for kind you may have experienced inside the relationship. The clean, clarifying, this was not okay kind. The anger that has been waiting patiently behind the grief and the longing and the self-doubt, and one day just walks through the door. Welcome it. I know that might feel strange to hear, especially if you're a woman who was raised to be gracious, to be the peacemaker, to prioritize everyone else's comfort in a room, including the comfort of the person who hurt you. Anger can feel dangerous, unladylike, like a loss of control you can't afford. But anger in this context is not a loss of control. It is the return of it. It means some deep part of you has stopped believing the story that it was all your fault. It means your self-protective instincts, which were suppressed, confused, gaslit into silence for so long, are coming back online. Feel it. Write it if you need to. Talk it through with someone safe. Move it through your body. Let it be as large as it actually is, at least in private, at least once. You don't have to act on it. You don't have to send the letter or make the call. But you do have to let it exist, because anger that gets turned inward, anger that has nowhere to go, becomes depression, becomes that bone, deep tired, that never quite lifts. Your anger is not ugly. It's honest. And you've been honest about everyone else's feelings for long enough. Here's what I want you to start thinking about, gently, with no pressure and no timeline, as the fog begins to lift. Who were you before? Not before them, necessarily. Maybe further back than that. Before you learned to make yourself convenient. Before you understood that love could be conditional. Before someone taught you, explicitly or wordlessly, that your needs were a burden and your feelings were an inconvenience. There's a version of you that existed before any of that. She had preferences, specific, unapologetic hers. She had things that made her laugh until she couldn't breathe. She had opinions she didn't immediately soften into questions. She took up space without calculating whether she was taking up too much. She's not gone. She's been in safekeeping. The way back to her isn't linear and it isn't fast, but it is made up of small, cumulative acts of self-reclamation. Some of them will feel almost comically minor. Ordering what you actually want off the menu without deferring to someone else's preference. watching the film you want to watch without negotiating, saying I don't like that to something out loud without a 3-paragraph apology attached, small